Welcome to the exciting rebirth of Superstar, featuring choose your membership rate as low as just $3 a month. At Superstar, you get expanded, exclusive video scopes each and every week, unlimited access to special horoscopes, class passes for Synchronicity University, consultations with me, and so much more. All of this in the Superstar space. I look forward to meeting you there. Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And when I say big, I mean massive. This is a year that a lot of astrologers, myself included, have been talking about for a lot of years, myself included, where chances are a lot of us are going to feel as if big changes have arrived. This is a time that is going to change our understanding of where we're going. Individually, yes, but collectively as well. What matters to us, where we're pouring that more of ourselves and feeling that our most important lessons lie, is likely to go through a big change. Now, March is the magic month. There is so much happening in March that does suggest a feeling of change is likely to be undeniable. We're going to have Saturn changing signs, and as Saturn leaves the sign of Aquarius 2 weeks later, here comes Pluto entering the sign of Aquarius, which is the very big news now. We're going to get a little taste of Pluto in a brand new sign, and then it will be in June that Pluto will retrograde out, returning to the sign of Capricorn, where he's been for about, well, quite a few years now. We've been feeling this energy since 2008. And so that's how slow moving the transits of Pluto can be. Next year, again, we'll get a little bit of in and out before it is that Pluto settles in to the sign of Aquarius. Overall, this is going to be a 20-year cycle. And it's now that we get to the very beginning. In the middle of May, Jupiter will change signs, moving into the sign of Taurus and setting up what astrologers call a grand cross. This is an important, larger configuration taking place in fixed signs, which does denote tremendous motivation to make changes, again, collectively and individually as well. The kind of changes that stick, that last. And this is going to speak to so many areas, but I see this as speaking to our understanding of what is prosperity, who has access to prosperity, and how do we feel about it? What is it that we truly value, and where is it that our own desires end and the interest of the collective begin? This is the beginning of some more deeper contemplations that we will be engaged in again for the better part of the next 20 years. Now, you add to this, we are going to spend a key part of the summer and into the fall with a Venus retrograde season as well. Venus retrograde will take place with Venus moving through the sign of Leo, and that is a very heart-oriented sign. It's also an energy of loyalty as well, where we will be looking that much more deeply at where it is our loyalties lie, especially in matters of heart. You add to this a bunch of eclipses. Well, there's so much to talk about here. Stay tuned to the end, where you will get preview horoscopes looking ahead at some key themes for this year for your sign. Now, the full video is available now at NadiyaShahSuperstars.com and also available for download at NadiyaShah.com. Now, it is with the full videos. They are quite extensive. They go through all the different things I'm going to talk about specifically for your sign. And I hope you absolutely enjoy them. And thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for being here as well. Now, I want to add, as always, throughout the year, there are special horoscopes when we have important astrological trends taking place, and be on the lookout for that as we start the year. We do so with Mars retrograde. And so, for example, there is a Mars retrograde special horoscope, and I will link to that below. And yes, upcoming trends will have their own special horoscope. Some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today, especially when I think about Pluto in Aquarius, that's something I want to spend a little bit of time on. And so part of this video may end up being repurposed as we navigate later in the year as well. As we begin the year, one of the more important trends is the fact that Mars is retrograde and has been retrograde since just before Halloween in 2022. And as Mars goes direct in the middle of January, what's interesting is that this is where Mars was in the early part of September of 2022. And so whatever's happening throughout this month, but especially around the 12th, will in some way reflect and give another perspective to what was taking place all the way back in September. It'll invite us to see it differently and perceive it and understand it differently. And the emphasis really here is on the understanding. This Mars retrograde has been taking place with Mars moving through the energy of Gemini. Now, Gemini is a sign that has to do with mind and perception, how we're talking about things and what we're talking about. And I think it is going to be that much more likely that a conversation, a moment is likely to awaken an understanding of how now we're understanding the events of then, specifically September, differently in some way, in a way that serves us that much better and helps us to feel like, okay, we finally are understanding things in a way that empowers our journey going forward from here. That's the thing with Mars. The larger lesson is always about understanding our own power, which is the very definition of empowerment, to be empowered. And to be empowered in oneself is a very powerful way to move one's life in the direction that you most desire to go. Well, how do you understand the best course of action to take? That may look very different as we navigate to the middle of the month and beyond. Now, as we move forward, though, it is going to be about 3 weeks into January that with Uranus going direct, all major planets are going to be direct for about 3 months. And this is powerful because it does suggest forward momentum in so many ways and in different areas of life for many of us out there. When planets go retrograde, it's a time to reflect, to go within, to contemplate more deeply what your truth is and how it is that you want to engage a particular energy, how you're going to use that part of you and your unique journey. When it is that planets are direct, though, it's a time for action. It's about creating more and more forward momentum and experiencing changes in a more practical way. Both are valuable. It's important to have moments where you're able to check in with yourself so that you're able to be that much more honest about what you really want and if you like the way in which things are going. But when it is that all major planets are direct, like they are going to be now, well, it does suggest a time when it becomes a lot more about taking action and deciding what you're going to live that much more clearly. And it is in this particular energy that we move forward and we move into the month of March. This is where March so much starts to change for so many of us out there. On the 7th of March is when Saturn will leave the sign of Aquarius and move into the sign of Pisces. Saturn's move through Aquarius has been huge, life-changing even, and I think it's been incredibly important to understand Saturn moving through Aquarius, as we have had this energy since 2020 in one way or another, as an important foreshadowing to the energy that we are going to begin to step into once we navigate later in March with Pluto stepping into Aquarius. But at least for now, as we are a week into March, it is going to be Saturn stepping into the energy of Pisces that is quite intriguing in and of itself. It is here that Saturn, a planet that has to do with reality and accepting reality, but also practical steps, action, and therefore practical manifestations and real opportunities as well. This energy of seriousness, of understanding that you get as much as you give, and that understanding that comes with knowing the sacrifices that have been made, but being honest enough with oneself to know whether or not those sacrifices are worth it. It's about honoring our earthly incarnation, knowing that we are incarnated for a reason. And a part of the reason, sure, is to learn from our external circumstances so that we may strengthen ourselves and increase our own spiritual appreciation and spiritual growth. But also, because we are incarnated for a reason, a part of the reason is understanding what it is that we are manifesting and understanding the self-respect that comes when you make a promise to yourself, you take action consistently over a period of time, and you learn about yourself in the process. And as a result, there are outcomes that happen in a real practical sense, in a sense that changes your lived experience. And that is one very powerful way towards earning one's own self-respect at that. That is one understanding of how powerful Saturn can be. And ultimately, all of these planets are a part of us. They live within us and we are their expression. And so here we are, we get Saturn stepping into a sign with all its practical energy, a sign that's rather dreamy. It's a sign that is about fantasy and imagination and desire and hope. It's about being swept up in a moment, getting swept up off your feet, getting carried away even. And that has value as well. Saturn and Neptune sometimes stand in contrast to each other, but really they need each other. That's something I learned from my dear friend, really celebrated Canadian astrologer, Robin Armstrong. And so I remember way back in the day when I first started my show, Synchronicity Web TV. So we're going back quite a while here, right? Robin was one of the first people who was generous enough to allow me to interview him. And he was saying at that time in these old school interviews going back that Neptune needs Saturn. Neptune needs Saturn. The reason he said that is because the dream is great. We need faith. We need the inspiration. But when it is that we can take that faith and actually embody it, well, that is when our faith becomes that much more real, that much more embodied, and takes on a quality of being lived that much more fully. And so, yes, we can have the dream, and that's a great thing, but how are we going to make it count for something? And that is part of what Saturn stepping into the sign of Pisces. Neptune is currently in the sign of Pisces as well. So it's magnifying this desire that a lot of us have for spiritual experience. And I actually believe that this is why astrology since 2012, since Neptune moved into this part of the sky, well, it seems like astrology has really taken off. It's reached that many more people than ever are into astrology. Yeah, because more people than ever are finding a desire to experience spirit through spiritual experience, through otherworldly experience, through experiences that help them to understand that they are part of some larger mystery. And so while that energy continues, it is Saturn now entering Pisces that I think is going to be so intriguing because in a sense, it's going to invite us to look at this contrast between the faith we have and how are we living it. What it is that we're truly believing and feeling, and what it is that the evidence might be showing us. But also, if it is that we have faith, which is a beautiful thing, how does it change the way in which we are with each other? What does compassion look like? That is something that is a deeply personal exploration. And yet that might be part of the exploration that a lot of us are on. You know, I actually also think that we've got Saturn entering Pisces. And over the course of this time, it is going to be Neptune that is in the later degrees of Pisces as well. And that energy is going to be with us this year, next year of Saturn in Pisces. We're going to have it in the year after as well. It isn't going to be until we get further into 2025 that Saturn and Neptune will actually meet in a brand new sign, in the sign of Aries. I'll be here to talk about these every step of the way. And I actually did a decade ahead horoscope. And so I will be sure to link to that below as well, because this is a massive trend. But the thing is, I think this is going to be important for us now, because it is now that as we have Saturn in the sign of Pisces, it's going to invite us to really look at faith and get honest with ourselves about what our faith actually is and what we've put our faith in. It is Saturn that invites us not to just accept, not to believe in illusions. And yet Neptune invites us to look at the great comfort that that can bring. The energy of Pisces, we are in a time of massive transition. We are moving out of the age of Pisces and we're moving into the age of Aquarius. And so I find it so interesting. It's like the age of Pisces is not going to go quietly. It's really going to want to be known that much more. And how it's going to do that, very likely with these energies, it speaks to how religious institutions may desire to have even more power or prominence. But at the same time, we may learn more about the reality behind certain religious institutions. It has been over the course of the last 2,000 years that we've had this age of Pisces playing out. And it's been a time of, and a culture of messiahs in many ways. We saw these major faiths sort of take over the world. And we saw how it is that, there's this phrase, a biblical phrase that says that God created us in its image. But when you really look at it and take a moment to study the different spiritual traditions, you realize that perhaps in many ways it's human beings that have created God in our own image. And I say that because there is this tremendous contradiction that we see in just about every important spiritual text that I've come across. I want you to consider that many of the world's religions talk about how there are many names to God, right? I think about how in the Bible there's 100 names for God. In the Quran, it's 99 names for God. In Buddhism, there's 36 names for the Buddha. And so we see this pattern, we see these traditions play out, and very often many of these names of God will contradict each other. And so we can have God be compassionate, but also vengeful. We can have God be self-sacrificing, but also selfish. And that's because that is whom it is that we are as human beings. And it's also because as we have grappled with what it is to be human, we've also grappled with these many faces of the God that we might have created in a given cultural context, historical context as well. And we've seen this especially flourish with the age of Pisces. And so now here we are, Saturn moving through Pisces is likely going to make itself known very quickly, with having us look at the reality of certain religious institutions. And so, again, I know that, for example, I am Canadian, born and raised, and in the last year or so, we've come to learn more and more about how residential schools were managed and some of the atrocities that happened there to our Indigenous people under the light of and under the guidance of and rulership of religious institutions. It's that type of awarenesses that could come about now. And yet again, it's like the age of Pisces. I don't see it going out quietly. It's almost as we're getting honest. There's also this desire to exert influence and power and containment in some way. And these insights, this true understanding of what could be coming up ahead for us with Pluto in Aquarius, well, it starts the 23rd of March. This first window is what we will have that takes us right to June 11. It's going to be next year that, again, we're going to have Pluto kind of step in and out of the sign of Aquarius. So we've got Pluto in an interesting part of the sky this year and next year for that matter as well. As Pluto steps into Aquarius, he also retrogrades out and is moving through the later degrees of Capricorn when he's not at the very beginning of Aquarius, especially this year. It won't be until 2025 that we will fully step into the energy of Aquarius, with Pluto in Aquarius that much more. And that really is going to be when we're going to experience that much more of stepping into that new age. I know I've been saying this to you as well. The world that we had at the very, very beginning of this decade, as we started this decade, is going to be a very different world that we will end the decade on. And we've already gotten glimpses into this. Think back to the end of March, beginning of April 2020, right? I'm sure that that time stands out in a lot of people's minds. And I remember saying to you, even before then, a couple years before then, I was talking about how once we get to the end of March of 2020, Saturn and Mars both are going to meet at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And this is going to be one of the most profound foreshadowings into what this upcoming Pluto in Aquarius is likely to mean for us as a collective. Now, there were several things that happened at this time as these two energies met, and we get to now figure out what we're going to do with it and how now, as we step into Pluto and Aquarius and these energies intensify that much more, what sense we're going to make of it, and also where possible, how are we going to direct these energies? And I say where possible because, of course, it's a wonderful thing to know that we participate in the unfolding of the universe. And yet at the same time, Pluto is often associated with karma and karmic reaping. It's associated with experiences that we feel we don't have power over and can feel very consuming as well. And so I'm going to invite you to think back and connect to this energy that we step into, these months that we're going to have through the spring of Pluto at the very beginning of the sign of Aquarius. So here are some things that I think are very likely and things that I've been thinking about and exploring. So what was the first thing that I think most people think of when they think back to that time? Well, I know that for me, I don't recall hearing the words social restriction before then. Like that really was a phrase that took over the world, right? And in an instant, it felt like our lives went online. Just like that, all of us had to live our lives virtually in a sense. And I find that rather fascinating. You know, the sign of Aquarius, it's so fascinating. You know, I never like to call out other astrologers. I think that we all have our own relationship to the sky. And that relationship is going to be deeply personal. And so you can't really tell somebody what their relationship to the sky should be, certainly. But there are certain core understandings of what certain symbols mean. And when we go back in history and we look at the modern ruler of Aquarius is Uranus. And when Uranus was discovered, this was when we had this, what's understood as the Cartesian split. And the Cartesian split is encapsulated by a phrase that comes from Descartes. And it is, I think, therefore I am, right? I think, therefore I am. Never was there such an Aquarian phrase ever, right? That encapsulates Aquarius so perfectly, because what you see when you look at the glyph of Aquarius is two waves. And these waves represent a duality to them, a contrast, if you will. And what Descartes was essentially saying with this phrase is, mind is one thing and body is another. And this is a quite profound understanding. This was not the way we understood what it was to be human up until this time. Up until this time, it wasn't that mind was one thing, body was another, but they were infused in each other. There was this singular integration of all things, and all things had symbolism, a richness to them as well. And there are wonderful things that have come about with the Cartesian split, mainly equality. Mainly, if you recognize that mind is one thing, then you don't judge people based on the shell, right, of whatever their gender, their race, or all those different ways in which we might separate ourselves from each other based on the vehicle with which the mind or the soul or the spirit, right, those words are understood interchangeably. You can't really judge somebody based on that. You can't say that one's mind is in some way less because of the physical shell. It's been a journey, and it continues to be a journey. But the reason I mentioned, and the thing that always comes into my mind, again, you can't judge other people. They have their own way of understanding and articulating. But I remember years ago coming across an astrologer who said, I think, therefore I am, is the age of Pisces. And boy, was that really, really not understanding what Descartes meant when he said, I think, therefore I am. He was speaking to a duality of human existence. So again, I can't tell other people. And yet, yeah, there are certain things that are a core understanding here. And so if you think back to the end of March, beginning of April, 0 degrees, Mars meeting Saturn. This represented a time of all of a sudden we had to live online. It's like the body and the consciousness separated. And so we had to find a way to have an experience and an existence that wasn't necessarily an embodied one. We were no longer swimming in waters of each other and of the collective and of our environment, but rather we were hyper individuals, but also separated in a sense from our physical self, and being more associated with these other qualities of our mind, of our consciousness, which is what shows up that much more in our online world. And so overnight, a lot of us started living online a lot more. That was a huge shift that happened. Social restriction was a part of that. That phrase was something that no one had really heard of before. The other important thing that took place at that time was overnight, oil became worthless. And, I remember talking about how the lead up to this 0 degree of Aquarius energy was the fact that in January of 2020, we had the conjunction of Pluto and Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. And the sign of Capricorn has to do with power and hierarchy and who has the power. And with Pluto in Capricorn, energy we've been experiencing since 2008, we have seen how power is embodied and magnified and exerted in ways that aren't necessarily always fair. Certainly, how power can be abusive as well. But consider this, and I remember saying to you way back then, if it is that this conjunction of Saturn and Pluto represents a shift in world power, we are going to begin to get insights into what direction, in which, and whom it is with where we are likely to find the next world power emerge. And chances are it's going to be very rooted in ideas. Well, when oil became worthless, you know, it really made me think about how who has the power in the world is really the people who have the oil in many ways. Oil began to cost more to store it than to give it away. And I thought about how the energy of Aquarius is an energy of ideas. And, you know, it's been predicted for a long time astrologically, but also by futurists as well. They've talked about how the world and the future economy will belong to those who have the ideas. And so I think it is very likely that as Pluto just steps into the sign of Aquarius, we are going to start to see alternative energies emerge, new ideas around how to engage our needs for energy as well, so that we can accelerate that sense of more people coming into not just the modern world. And I want to say that without as much judgment. What I mean by that is there are many life-saving advantages to having access to electricity, for example. And what happens when we as a world insist that everybody has access to electricity, no matter where you are on the planet? When the whole world went online, we learned that how much of a necessity being online and having access to internet actually is. And so what happens if we in the world make a commitment to ensuring that the internet is accessible to the entire planet? How would that change the world and the planet as well? Well, I think we'll start to understand ourselves as more intimately connected that much more. It is incredible to consider how, you know, with astrologers, we like to say as above, so below. Whatever's happening in our lived experience in some way reflects what has been happening on a level of our consciousness and what is happening in the sky. They're all working in tandem. They reflect each other. They don't cause either or. And in this way, yes, we do participate in the unfolding of the universe because it's all happening at the same time. It's quite incredible that we as humanity manifested the internet. I think it speaks profoundly to our understanding of our consciousness, and it represents a leap in consciousness and our understanding of our innate interconnection to each other. The internet is a world that is at once virtual and not real, but where nothing really is deleted, right? Everything lasts forever on the internet in some ways. It's somewhere out there. And so we got to this place, if you think back to what was happening like sort of late March and beginning of April of 2020, oil became worthless. That would shift world power, right? These governments that maybe don't always do things ethically, don't prioritize equality or human rights, they have the oil. And so it's almost like it's permitted. And yet Pluto's moving into a sign that has to do with equality. It has to do with things being in a space where you no longer are able to control based on the shell of a person, but rather there is the acknowledgement of that eternal mind, right? The thought, the spirit. And when you do that, when you acknowledge that that exists, and when people recognize that within themselves, they become very unstoppable in their own way. But I think that what we've also seen is a desire to control internet access as well. Governments had figured out that if it is that you allow people access to the internet, you give them a voice, you allow them to connect with others. And so we've seen this in a few different places in the world. I'm thinking about, for example, Kashmir, which is a region that is sort of in South Asia. And it's a region that's wanted independence and autonomy for a very long time, since the partition in the 1940s. And so basically, this region was overtaken. And when it was overtaken, the first thing that the government did was shut down the internet, shut down all communication, and in that way attempted to make other people in the world less aware, make it not become a world incident by shutting off people's ability to speak for their experience, to be able to share their experience in a larger sense. And we've seen this in other places as well, where before this control, for example, I'm thinking about the Arab Spring, for example, that happened quite a while back, right? That was over a decade ago. A big part of what facilitated that, the spirit of change that swept through different parts of the world, right? In the US, there was the Occupy movement. These were all movements taking place even earlier, encapsulated by Uranus as modern ruler of Aquarius. So we got a little hint of that, but the internet was such a big part of what allowed these big movements to happen. And yet we don't hear about that as much anymore because of the ways in which to control the means of communication is to control how much people are able to reach others. And so it'll be interesting to see how that continues to be a trend. But I know with Saturn in Aquarius, we saw this become a way in which whatever information got out became that much more controlled with the more restrictive side of Saturn. With Pluto being very intense, taking things into overdrive, we might see some of that energy go into overdrive as well. You know, I was also thinking about lately, a lot of people have been talking about the Kardashians. I'm going to touch on that a little bit as well, because I think they are a fascinating embodiment of an understanding of what we as a collective are drawn towards, responding towards. And if you think back, the Kardashians, their first reality show launched in 2007. And this was the late degrees, like sort of the end of Pluto in Sagittarius. Now, my friend Andy, right, you know, I've been sharing him. He has a new channel called Wise Ass Astrology. He's one of the most brilliant astrologers I know, I'll tell you, and I've known him for about 10 years now. Just brilliant. But yes, he is kind of a wise ass. And so you've got to be into that cheeky kind of presentation and language and stuff to really enjoy it. He's got, if I remember correctly, Sun conjunct Uranus in Scorpio. So that's what you're going to get from him, okay? If you enjoy his channel. And I hope that you are. I've loved watching him grow with this new channel as well. But I remember, you know, us talking once at one of the conferences, because, you know, we're big conference buddies. We always hang out together at conferences. If you see me at an astrology conference, you're probably going to see me with him. And so I remember us talking about Sagittarius, right? The energy of Sagittarius. And he was talking about how someone, a member of Two Live Crew, who was part of a song called I Like Big Butts, and how that person's chart had a lot of Sagittarius. And it was all very cheeky and very fun. But, you know, I thought about how culturally what we respond to very often is encapsulated by the moves of the outer planets. And the energy of Sagittarius, yes, it is on a level of physicality. It does speak to a more curvy appearance. And so we saw with the Kardashians coming on, with Sagittarius having to do with the exotic and what we consider exotic. They were an embodiment of these very qualities. They were seen as curvy women. They were very proud and had lots and lots of photos in the early years of their backside. And even as they, you know, continued to grow, they literally grew, right, through the help of surgery to emphasize their backside that much more. But they also had a look that was seen as exotic, especially for the time. But what you've seen with Pluto moving through Capricorn is you've seen them change their image more and move more and more in the direction of embodying status. And especially status symbols have become really important to their brand, if you will, and how they present themselves. And now, as we are starting, like towards the end, we're at the beginning of the end of Pluto and Capricorn, what we're getting is we're getting this almost like really turning away from all of that Sagittarian energy that first had so many people responding to them. And you can literally see it down to their physical bodies, where there was a recent episode of one of their new reality shows, and it got a lot of attention because there was this spirit of celebration and glee around two of the women, really other family members being concerned with how thin they had gotten. And I thought about, the mountain goats that are connected to the sign of Capricorn, and how they are very light, right? Mountain goats, they tend to be really skinny because and their feet really, really tiny because they have to sort of climb these mountains with very small ledges, and they have to be able to excel and survive in that environment. That's what that environment asks of them. And it was so fascinating to me that as we're moving towards the end of this larger cycle, how, our public figures, ultimately, they embody these larger cultural trends, and how the Kardashians have come to embody that and really see that ride through, and really saw their own rise as they walked Pluto in Capricorn. And so now here we are. And of course, with you think about Kardashians, and it represents celebrity, it represents status, it represents money and success. And so, of course, I'm not talking about individual people, but just as a brand in a larger sense, in a meta sense. So again, think back. What happened when we got to the end of March, beginning of April? It was sort of this trend that started that was of the anti-celebrity, right? Overnight, we had what showed up, TikTok, right? TikTok just really took over the world very quickly. An app that had been around, but then it really took off. And part of the reason it took off was because you could have people record something for 5 seconds, and it could reach a whole lot of people very quickly, and they could be the average person. But your average everyday person could go viral. And those that were celebrities that had, power and status, it's almost like they began to be cringed at, to be mocked. I remember, again, in the early days of the pandemic, another trend that sort of took over was making sourdough bread, which is bread that I think is made with like 3 ingredients or something. I don't cook. Like, there's a whole story about that. I don't know anything about cooking. My mom, she had to take care of other people her entire life. She was the oldest of 10. And I remember her saying to me when I was very young that God had different plans for my life. So she never really wanted me to learn how to do any of those household things. And I never did. So, and she was right. Yes, there were different plans for my life than what her life was, but her life is beautiful. And I love that she's my mom. So yes. I don't know anything about cooking. All of that is to say. And it was so interesting that this very every person thing, like creating sourdough bread, and all these people doing this very plain, regular, every person thing, is what captured a lot of people's attention. And we started to see how people actually live in a very human way. It wasn't about the red carpet flash. It was about those humble moments, personal moments as well. And we also became aware of things like disparity that much more. For example, essential workers. Essential workers are really very often the people who are the least paid as well. And we got to see how essential workers, what makes them so essential, right? And a part of it is because what they're doing may seem so ordinary on the surface. It may seem like everyone can do it. It doesn't really have that kind of value that we place on things like creative expression and creativity. And yet it is so valuable. And that's also a part of the energy of Aquarius. It has to do with that every person. It has to do with the collective. It has to do with our similarities. We began to value authenticity and understanding what it is to be you that much more. We began to value things like self-knowledge. And so it wasn't about these outward successes and those status symbols that embody success, but rather it was, and it became about understanding oneself much more personally and getting in touch with what really matters, right? That's how we understood it. I remember, for example, going back to my mom, 2019, my mom said to me, you know, I've never had a Louis Vuitton handbag. And I said, don't worry, Mom, we're going to get you a Louis Vuitton handbag. And so I did get her that for the Christmas season. She was very, very happy with it. When the pandemic happened, you think anybody cared about that bag? I mean, it was completely not even of significance anymore. What mattered was, and what came to the surface was, wanting to know that my parents were going to be okay, you know, wanting to know that they were safe, and doing what I could to ensure that they were safe. Like, this became sort of the guiding principle. And of course, that's not to say there weren't people early on rebelling against that. That's also very Aquarian as well. And as we moved forward, there were more and more people sort of rebelling against an understanding of what is the right behavior at this given time. Where does the individual end and the collective begin? And so you saw resistance around that as well. And was really part of figuring out the energy, right? Striving to understand the best way forward from here for as many people as possible. But yes, these were the lessons that we were engaged in. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is I'm saying that whatever was happening back then, we are about to go to a whole other intensity with it, with Pluto in Aquarius. And I want you to consider this as well, that 0-degree Aquarius, that is also where in the middle of December, we had the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And this was an emphasis on science and scientific breakthrough and scientific discovery that started to take on greater prominence. This was when vaccines started to be announced, and there was a sense of celebration around that. So there was this sense that, okay, science is going to be our way forward. And this was also where we started to see more and more where people were starting to make it that much more a norm of working remotely. And we also started to see this a time when different countries started to explore and present remote worker visas. And so remote worker visas, because I am a remote worker and I have been for so many years, I know a little bit about this. They have just become so much more prevalent, especially the end of 2020. And as we were starting 2021, so many governments around the world started presenting these, which basically were like extended tourist visas. So normally when you go to a country, you get a visa, depending on your own passport. It might be a 3-month visa, it might be a 6-month visa. When you get these remote worker visas, basically you continue working remotely with your own company in your own home, but you get a visa instead for like a year. And normally you can extend that over the course of up to 3 years or 5 years, depending on the country. And this has become something that we've seen in many, many countries taking place, and even more continually being announced as well. But really the big launch of them, the discussion around them, the push around them really started to happen with the Great Conjunction. And it's so interesting because Aquarius is an energy of mind, and on a level of mind, there are no borders. There's no borders. That's where you're really free. And this is a symbol of moving towards breaking free of borders, if you will, or having borders be less significant than before. And yet it's also additional paperwork. It's that contradiction of Aquarius where, yes, on the one hand, you get to access more of the world for a longer period of time, but You also got to fill out a lot of the paperwork. I have a Sag moon. I've looked into it. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into these. And yet it's programs that are being announced that make more of the world accessible at the same time. Just like Neptune in Aquarius brought with it Facebook, right? That was the big social media energy that came about. It was Uranus in Aquarius. That was part of Twitter. And that whole trend, anytime we have big energies in Aquarius, another social media or way of connecting with socially tends to launch. And of course, with Saturn in Aquarius, it was TikTok. Now every app is trying to be TikTok. But it's so fascinating. Something that I talk about in the business classes that I teach is, and with Kepler College, I teach a business class once a year. And we talk about how with YouTube, there tends to be that much more of a personal relationship that you create, what's called a para relationship. And we see this emphasized in other spaces as well, like Twitch, where you'll be with a person for a period of time and you will have a relationship with them, a para relationship, yes, where they may not know you, but you feel like you know them. You are inviting them into your home, onto your smart TV, into your kitchen. You're spending time with them consistently. Depending on the platform, depending on the creator, it might be every day, it might be once a week like it is for me, but you create that bond and there's a sense of that person being more of an anchor. That para relationship is very, very difficult to form on an app like TikTok. It is well documented as a phenomenon that a creator on TikTok with millions of subscribers won't have nearly as much reach and connection with their audience as someone with a few thousand subscribers on YouTube, for example, or Twitch, for example. And so now every app is trying to be TikTok because they see how this, short attention span. It was Andy Warhol that said, everyone will be famous for at least 15 minutes. Now with TikTok, it's 15 seconds, right? Everybody gets 15 seconds of fame. Well, you add Pluto in Aquarius, it might be 5 seconds of fame that everybody gets, but everybody will get their turn. Everybody will get their day in the sun, yes. And it is TikTok that really encapsulates that promise that everybody will get that moment and that promise. We can expect to see the next really big app sort of take over. We may see it start to be introduced or maybe launched, especially in the early part with this year, with 2023 and that first step of Pluto into Aquarius. But what that trend is likely to be and how that's likely to influence how we interact through social media is going to start to show itself quite early. So I would be on the lookout for that. And if you are so inclined, you might want to jump on certain new apps that may present themselves at that time as well. Now, here's another layer to consider. The energy of Capricorn is very traditional, and it's about affirming traditional hierarchies, traditional structures. And what we've seen is this sense of resistance really to change. And we have seen prominent voices emerge that embody this sense of promoting ideas that, okay, we can say are traditional, but also in some ways are not necessarily very respectful or inclusive. In fact, they can be the opposite of it. I'm thinking about more lately, okay? I remember with Saturn and Aquarius, one thing that we saw was people, especially in the early on phase, people being punished for flexing. And so what that is if you are going online to show how fabulous your life is, that didn't really engender affection by people. In fact, it could be the opposite many times. And what we're now seeing with Pluto in these last degrees of Capricorn, and almost like we're gearing up and preparing for that energy of Aquarius, well, what we're seeing is people who have promoted really intense ideas that are misogynistic, that are xenophobic. We've seen that promoted, and we are seeing how that is being responded to, how that's being thwarted as well, and figuring out the right way to do that so that efforts to change those types of attitudes are that much more effective. I think approaching that from a place that is more empirical, that's more scientific, is likely going to take on greater importance. Of course, I'll be here to talk about it every step of the way, but I want to remind you that it is going to be in 2024, next year, that we are going to have Neptune just hanging out at the very end of the sign of Pisces. And a big chunk of that time, it's going to be Pluto hanging out at the very end of the sign of Capricorn. And so to me, this is like this hyper illusion meeting a hyper hierarchy and a desire to hang on to those hierarchies. And that includes in beliefs that like in a divine right of certain people, like very misogynistic ideas, for example, that we've seen a lot of as of late, especially as Pluto's been moving more and more later into the sign of Capricorn. That's starting to be challenged, and it's going to be more and more challenged. And we're going to, as a collective, be looking at how to bring solutions that have been proven to work. And there are a lot of solutions that have been proven to work. People who are finding themselves, for example, young men. There's been a lot of conversation around young men lately as we've started 2023. And the state of young men, and why is it that young men are finding themselves drawn to ideas that are misogynistic? And very often what has been found is the solution is community. The solution is connection with others. What often is the antidote to addiction? It's acknowledging and addressing the deep loneliness that lies at the core of the addict and addressing that need for human connection as a force of healing. And I think we're going to start to see those types of solutions more and more as a way to counter some of these ideas that people start to be more susceptible to when they feel isolated and when they feel alone. There's a reason that so many cultures consider community the nucleus of society, because community can be a force of healing. But the problem happens when that community dictates what individuals are allowed and not allowed to be, when it is that people ultimately are just trying to be themselves and be at peace with themselves. And so that contradiction has been part of the human experience through much of the age of Pisces, certainly, but especially since we first started transitioning into the age of Aquarius with the discovery of Uranus in the second part of the 1700s. Now, we're about to step into it that much more. So we're going to find those solutions that we've been looking for, and they're going to be based on what has been proven to work scientifically, so again and again and again. Am I saying that all types of hate will be wiped from the world? Look, possibly not, because it is a defense mechanism of the psyche to resist looking at one's own sadness and one's own feelings of unworthiness and where that comes from. It is sort of a survival mechanism to instead say, no, it's not that I am unworthy, it's that these other people are wrong, that I'm better than other people. When one can't admit that they don't feel themselves to be worthy, they may at times need to have other people be less worthy so that they can feel more, but that never really works, right? That's the thing. Being at peace with oneself means that you give up those notions, and that can be hard for people, especially when chaos can feel so addictive. And that's the thing. Addiction with all that Piscean energy could be there. But I think we're going to start to see some solutions as well, and start to feel more of us move in a direction of understanding what's going to work for more people and to help more people feel connected to each other. That just might be the force of healing that we're looking for and the transformative energy we're looking for. And that need for that type of transformation is part of what could start showing up more and more, especially once it is that we get that little bit of taste of Pluto in Aquarius. On May 16, that is when we are going to have Jupiter move into the sign of Taurus, leaving the energy of Aries behind, not to return for over a decade. As it is that Jupiter steps into Taurus, it really is those first days that are going to make us very aware that things have changed. Now, as a general principle though, Jupiter in Taurus tends to be really good for the economy. It helps us to understand prosperity more expansively as well. It tends to be good for putting things into place like supports and different programs into place that ultimately will encourage economic growth and economic development. However, the need for such a thing may show up right around the middle of May as we have Jupiter stepping into the sign of Taurus. What will happen is that first, 2 days later, we have Jupiter perfecting a square to Pluto. And then 2 days after that, the 20th of May, is when Mars comes into the mix. You add to this the nodes. This is where we're looking at a grand cross. It is a larger configuration where it isn't just about a singular square, which tends to be two planets which are both in signs of the same modality, but different signs. And it's there that we will see a type of conversation that brings with it tension, but also motivation to do something and integrate these energies and work with these energies so that some outcome is reached or produced. Now, add all of the fixed signs into the mix, all of the signs of the same modality into the mix. And here you have an even larger major configuration that has a whole lot of tension to it, but also a lot of motivation as well. Given that the modality here is fixed. So fixed signs are those that take place in the middle of a season and they hold the energy of a given season as well, as opposed to cardinal signs that will start a season or mutable signs that will end a season. And so all of these big placements, the nodes in the early part of the fixed signs, with the south node in Scorpio, the north node in Taurus, and we have Jupiter stepping in 0 degrees of Taurus, Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius, Mars at 0 degrees of Leo. And you put all these energies together and you can see here that it's almost like there's an energy that becomes very stubborn. It becomes hard to budge certain people, places, things, situations. It's like the need for change is there, but so is the profound resistance to change that can be there as well. And this energy can show up in all kinds of ways for the collective. But consider this, it is the energy of Leo that speaks to the individual, the celebrity. It speaks to those who are special. It speaks to those that shine brighter than others. It speaks to our understanding of what it is that makes us special in our heart of hearts and trusting our heart as well. Fixed signs as a general principle can also be very loyal. It is the energy of Leo that comes at loyalty from a heart-centered place, which can make it that much more powerful as well. The energy of Aquarius, where Pluto will be, is also fixed. And so it holds a sense of its own understanding of not just specialness, but the thing is that we are all special. And so, yes, you may be special, but we all are, and therefore none of us is sort of the way to understand Aquarian energy. But it stands in contrast to the energy of Leo in that, whereas Leo is the celebrity and those who are special, it is Aquarius that says, it's not about the individual, it's about the collective. It's about what all of us are doing, what all of us may be feeling, and what's for the best of all of us. It's not about you shining, it's about tapping into your own shine and letting that be enough. But yes, I see this as speaking to the needs of the collective versus the individual. Now you add Jupiter in Taurus into the mix, and it becomes about how this plays out in terms of the economy, the breakdowns of economy, and who has economic advantages and who doesn't, and are we going to make that more fair or not? There may be some resistance around that, but this could be part of the conversation that's finding us at this time. And with the South Node in Scorpio, this, on the one hand, it is not only about the South Node in Scorpio, but that the North Node is directly opposite in the very early part of the sign of Taurus, which means Jupiter mighty close to that North Node as well. And so it's almost like we as a collective are moving in the direction of understanding prosperity differently, abundance differently, and access to it differently as well. But with Scorpio and the South Node in Scorpio, there are some power struggles here. There might be some power games here as well, where those who have power, particularly economic power, may not necessarily be as embracing of an understanding of all of us being special or all of us having power as well. And that's one way to understand these energies. Another way to understand these energies, look, the energy of Scorpio is about what's happening under the surface, what the truth actually is, and acknowledging when the truth is less than pretty. The energy of Taurus, though, it has to do with enjoying our earthly incarnation. It has to do with being present for our lives and knowing that we are worthy and connecting to that so deeply. This axis of Scorpio and Taurus invites us to heal our stuff so that we can own our worthiness and find a grounded sense of self-love. Now, you add the other fixed signs into the mix that are being activated at this time, and we find a contrast here between what makes you special, but also what makes you just as special and equal as anybody else. What is it that's going to make you feel good about who you are, but also how is it that you can still embrace your place in the world with humility and understanding about how so much of whom it is that we become really is rooted in the opportunities available to us. And so it'll be interesting to see how we as a collective are navigating this energy. But yes, chances are there are going to be significant cultural events at this time that stir the need to have these reflections and conversations in real ways and practical ways at that, right to the surface, and could lend themselves to very important changes and what some people would consider progress, especially economic as well. Now, I would be mindful at this time as to how it is that we are speaking about abundance and prosperity, who has access to it, but also the sharing of it as well. And so, you know, it is Stephen Forrest. He spoke of this in the interview that I did with him recently, and I'll be sure to link to that below. And he talked about how he felt concerned that Pluto in Aquarius, just like Pluto in Capricorn showed us the dark side of more conservative policies, Pluto in Aquarius could show us the dark side of more progressive policies. Well, what might that look like? And how might that show up? And especially in terms of how the economy works, I think some of that is going to stir very powerfully at this time as well, as we navigate to that mid-spring period of time, where that could be an important part of the discussion, and the resistance to some of those ideas can show up at this time as well. And so I am Canadian. We are a middle power. We like the middle way, but also was raised by very proud feminists and progressives. And so it'll be interesting to see how the world understands and utilizes this understanding of how in many ways there's going to likely be a greater pull towards more progressive ideas at this time. But it's one thing to talk about it and have it as a concept and an ideas. It's another thing to, where they say, put your money where your mouth is, to actually back it up with actual tax policies, for example, right? That may be part of what we're looking at as a collective and how we end up working with these energies and finding a way to have them work together, because that's ultimately what they're asking for, especially at this time. Well, how are we going to do that and navigate this time? Remember, this is just a glimpse into some much more intense energies that we are going to find ourselves in once we move further into this decade as well. And so this is a glimpse. It's an energy. It comes and it goes rather quickly. And we're going to have that Pluto retrograde. Remember, this is just before Pluto retrogrades out of Aquarius back into Capricorn, which is going to bring a reaffirming of those hierarchies, those structures. And that is something that we may need to be mindful of as well. Just as we think for some of us that we're making progress, there's going to be that resistance to it that could have us taking one step forward and two steps back. It'll feel that way at first in 2023 and 2024, but we're going to fully step into Pluto and Aquarius in 2025. And that really is when things change that much more. Let's talk about this year's eclipses. Eclipses always bring change because eclipses speak to what a higher, more loving vision for your life might be and aligns you with those changes. And the more it is that we've sort of gotten off the path of that higher, more loving vision, the more dramatically events might bring us back. But if it is that we're already listening and paying attention, well, chances are whatever it is that does show up at this time, it'll feel more easy to integrate. It'll feel a little bit more organic at that. So I want to be sure to go through these 4 important eclipse dates here. So the first eclipse date takes place on the 20th of April. And this is going to be a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries. And this eclipse is mighty close in the sky to Jupiter. It is hand in hand with Jupiter. This is remarkable. This solar eclipse brings with it new beginnings, but chances are a lot of us are going to feel like this is very fortunate energy. However, it is the energy of Aries, and Aries has to do with a few things, athletics, but it also has to do with war, I'm sorry to say, but that could be one way that this shows up. It can have to do with the performance of power. So the warriors are covered here. Police officers are covered by this energy as well. We will have Chiron not too far away also. And so what's happening at this time can bring with it a heightened sense of vulnerability, but also healing as well. I'm reminded of the video that I created for Chiron and Aries. That's a video that I'm really proud of. I'll try to link to it below. I'll try to remember to do that. Because I spoke about how we can spend a lot of time looking at how there are real things that happen that are not right and not fair. But they are done by people who are approaching the demonstration of and the performance of power. And very often these people who perform power for us collectively, they embody the performance of power. Very often these are people who have felt powerless at certain times in their life, very often in childhood. And it's because of that that they're drawn to performances of power that much more. And so what would it look like if we actively wanted to embrace and understand and recruit people to those positions where power is performed, but to do so with people who maybe aren't coming at it from a place of being unconscious of their own feelings of powerlessness, because those tend to be the people that create that much more pain. I hope you can see how I made those connections there, but I think that's been part of the larger learning and the larger lesson that we have been engaged in, going all the way back to 2018. That was when this Chiron and Aries transit began, and it is going to be with us past the middle of this decade. So Chiron isn't too far away. Jupiter is quite close to this eclipse as well. And so this may be part of a new understanding of what power is, how we're going to use it, how we're going to express it, how we're going to explore it. But this could also be a time of celebrating athletic achievement, feeling as if what's happening in some athletic forum is bringing a spirit of healing to so many as well. So there can be that inspiration and that sense of new possibilities here. But at the same time, there can be a move at this time to call for a different way to understand the demonstration of power in all kinds of ways, in all kinds of layers. You know, there's also been this conversation around defund the police. And of course, it's not about defunding them. It's about understanding the role of police and bringing a greater sense of awareness of what's actually going to work, and not asking police to be 10 different things that are not what they are meant to be. That's how I see that phrase. And so, for example, many situations actually need a social worker, and yet we ask people who are going to embody power and force and assertion to also be social workers and therapists and medics, and we asked them to take on all these different roles that doesn't necessarily fit the archetype that the role asks for. And so this could be a time when we're making those distinctions as well, so that even policing can become more effective, when it is that you recognize that there's certain types of policings that have to be Aries, but there are times when it isn't about Aries. There are times when it's about Scorpio, understanding what is actually going on. There are times when it's about Virgo. It's about being of service. It's about of being present for another person. Those are very distinct roles, and there is enough space for all of it. The fact that this is going to be while Pluto is in Aquarius, I think allows that sense of healthy detachment that ultimately is going to allow us to make the most of whatever realizations and new beginnings are being inspired at this time. It will be 2 weeks later that we will have a lunar eclipse in the sign of Scorpio. Speaking of which, right? Now, interestingly, Aries and Scorpio are both ruled by Mars, and it is Mars that is the ruler of the sign of Aries. The ancient ruler of Scorpio is Mars as well, but they're different. It is Mars in its day, what the ancients called in its day. So the part of Mars that we understand as very action-oriented, very driven, very focused, that is one expression of Mars. But there's another expression of Mars, what the ancients called Mars in its night, as ruler of Scorpio, that is about really getting to the core understanding, the core truth of a given situation, understanding how to transform a situation, figuring out a mystery in terms of like detective work, for example. This precision of perspective can be very much associated with the qualities of Mars as well as ancient ruler of Scorpio. This particular eclipse is going to be opposite Uranus. So to me, this is about some truth coming out. in a way that can feel very dramatic, like we really know what's going on under the surface very quickly. And we're going to have this eclipse trine Mars as well. And so that trine to Mars spurs us to action. It's a lunar eclipse, so it's like the truth in the light of the full moon. I think this could be a moment when we learn about what's been happening where it comes to financial matters that haven't been so apparent. So I think back to last year, what was the big news that came about? Well, it had to do with cryptocurrency and how they were going bankrupt and scams around that. And people were asking, like, what's real? What's really going on? What is actually of value and what is manipulation? And so we saw this trend show up with some of the eclipse energies that we had in the second part of last year. In particular, we saw this stir very strongly. And I think it's going to be now that some of that energies may stir again in terms of understanding what sorts of financial investments are real, what are not, what's really been going on. I think all of that could come to the surface very quickly at this time. You know, it's interesting because Uranus, of course, is in the sign of Taurus, and this has represented the rise of cryptocurrencies. And throughout this year, Uranus will stay in the sign of Taurus as well. However, we're starting to see how there's something very volatile and not necessarily stable about Uranus. And so, yeah, these cryptocurrencies are not necessarily stable. And then it's also, there's this myth around how real is it? It's not. Do you pay taxes on it or not? And I think that we as a collective are figuring all of that out right now. And I think Jupiter in Taurus is going to give us that much more motivation to strive to figure that out that much more. To bring some sense of containment to those Uranian energies that have had that whole environment feel like it's been so up and down, dramatically so day to day. How do we create stability with this new understanding of currency? Well, that may be part of the exploration with Jupiter in the sign of Taurus in particular, once we get past the middle of May of this year and into next year as well. In the middle of July, the nodes will change signs, with the North Node moving into the sign of Aries, the South Node into Libra. And this energy will be with us for about a year and a half. And as the nodes change signs, it speaks to a shift in our understanding of the direction in which we are going, whether you want to call it on a spiritual level, on an unconscious level, but it starts to feel that much more like we are embracing new understandings, especially where the North Node goes into. I think that this is going to represent the beginning of a period of time, starting in the middle of July, where those very things I just spoke of how it is that Chiron in Aries is going to be awakening and inspiring us to understand power differently and the show of power differently and protection differently as well. What happens when we bring a spirit of growth and evolution to that journey? I think that is going to be part of the exploration that we will find starting in July and going forward from there. This can be a profound period of time of growth and change and evolution in a way that really helps us to understand power differently in a much more healthy and balanced way. It is going to be October 14th that we will begin the final two. So we'll have a series of eclipses. Eclipses always come in pairs. It's October 14th that we will have a solar eclipse in the sign of Libra. This solar eclipse is conjunct Mercury, so it's hand in hand with Mercury, but it's in a conversation of tension with Pluto, and that's where things can get tricky. The conjunction to Mercury is a nicer energy. It is an energy of mind and new ideas and new connections and conversations. And so there's a sense of talking things through and presenting and welcoming in different ways of perceiving and understanding. The energy of Libra is an energy of diplomacy, and normally when it's highlighted, there tends to be a focus on more diplomatic solutions. And yet, we've got that square of Pluto happening, and Pluto squares can represent power struggles, power games, especially with Pluto at that time having moved back into the sign of Capricorn, of power, of hierarchies. I think that this is going to be a time when there's a lot of motivation and a sense that there's a need to practice diplomacy in some way, perhaps on the international stage, but it might feel tricky. It might lend itself to results that everyone isn't necessarily in agreement with, which can happen as well. And more personally, this can also speak to, and I see this eclipse, and especially with the South Node going into Libra, I think a lot of us as a collective, we're going to be talking about marriage, right? You look at how, historically speaking, I think back to the 70s in particular, we had Pluto moving through the sign of Libra. And that was massive change to divorce laws, right? All over the world. Our understanding of what marriage and relationship and partnership is supposed to be went through a massive change as well. And so now with this particular eclipse squaring Pluto, I think there may be cultural events that take place that have us looking at that again and with greater depth and understanding and nuance, and where it is perhaps that some of those understandings of relationships, makeups, breakups, well, how does it factor into an understanding of how to do that in a way that's healthier? At least we'll have the motivation there, but it may be because culturally speaking, it's encapsulated by certain events or people where maybe that didn't happen. Maybe it wasn't necessarily a very fair way of bringing a relationship to a conclusion, and it could lead to certain outcomes. So in order to counterbalance that, it's almost like an awareness may come about of what healthy partnerships look like, but also how to healthily and with respect and love and fairness bring certain relationships to a close and help them to transition into something different where appropriate. Where is it that we may need more social structures and systems in place that help people to do that in a healthy way? That may be part of the consideration of this time. On the 28th of October, we are going to have a lunar eclipse. Now, this lunar eclipse is hand in hand with Jupiter. It's in the sign of Taurus. And this comes back to the economy, and it comes back to what we value and an understanding of what healthy self-love looks like, but also what it might not be as well. With Jupiter, there is that spirit of healing here. And given that it is a lunar eclipse, it's helping us to admit to ourselves what we feel, but also bringing certain chapters to a close. And so this can be a very interesting time for the economy as well, where it may feel like events sort of have a will of their own, but ultimately are inviting us to reach a deeper place of understanding of what moving in a positive direction for the economy could look like. And yes, there could be some developments now that do feel inspired on the economic front for us as a collective. More people are likely going to be feeling as if they're having an understanding of what they really want to do, what they're meant to do, what they should do, and moving in that direction in terms of creating prosperity for themselves as well. Finally, let's talk about Venus retrograde season. This Venus retrograde this year will take place entirely in the sign of Leo. Now, when it is that Venus retrograde season begins, we do start a path towards understanding this guiding question, which is, do I love it? Person, place, thing, or situation. If there is love there, that will be revealed and it grows stronger. But if there isn't, if there's any doubt, if there's any uncertainty, all of that can stir to the surface as well. Breakups that happen during Venus retrograde tend to not stay broken up. And yet this particular Venus retrograde season could be challenging more than others might be. There are some key characteristics of this energy. So let me first give you the dates, because it is going to be the 20th of June that Venus will enter shadow. So this is the beginning of the pathway that Venus will walk, that she will eventually retrograde on, go backwards on, starting the 23rd of July. It will be the 3rd of September that Venus will go direct, the 7th of October when she leaves shadow. And so you can see here, it's an extended part of time, even though that short period of time when she's actually retrograde is thought to be the time when you really may not really know what you love. When you think you do, you don't. But it is this larger period that's going to help you to understand that much more deeply what it is that you're really wanting in your heart of hearts in all kinds of ways. Wherever Venus is traveling through, that area of life becomes an exploration as to whether or not there is love there, and how you're using different skills within yourself, different areas, to understand energy related to love, or lessons related to love as well, where you're most likely to find love, but also those love-related lessons that may not necessarily be easy. And I have to emphasize that these lessons may not be easy. A key characteristic of this larger Venus retrograde season is going to be that Venus is going to dance in square with Uranus. Yes, I said that correctly. If you are a student of astrology, I'm sure you're already going, oh, yeah, that's about the right reaction to have, because Uranus is the planet of surprise. It's a planet that represents and symbolizes how information or developments can seem to come out of nowhere. But there's something honest about them as well. That surprise factor is so strong with this, but needing to adapt to a surprise is very likely a larger theme at this time as well. When Venus squares Uranus, I always say it's not the time for romantic surprises. They're not going to go the way that you think. Now consider that this is a key characteristic, an ongoing dance that is going to characterize this larger season for so many of us out there. And you can see here that this is all about the truth coming out in love. You won't be able to escape the truth now. Now consider this additional layer, and that is a series of quincunxes to Neptune. So we've also got ongoing dance taking place with Neptune. And this suggests needing to face disappointment or uncertainty, or having questions that you didn't anticipate were going to rise, but then they do. And perhaps even feeling a sense of disappointment and malaise as well. And by that, I mean a sense of lethargy around a given relationship dynamic, just not seeing it very clearly. And so it becomes that much more imperative where it is that Uranus is hyper truth, Neptune is delusion and confusion. And so it becomes that much more imperative to pace yourself at this time. Again, breakups that happen tend to not stay broken up, but this can be a time when a lot of doubt does stir. And sometimes that's necessary, so that ultimately we can, on the other side of it, figure out what is true for us. And so this Venus retrograde season taking place in the sign of Leo, and Leo is about your own specialness and acknowledging what makes you special, knowing that you are worthy of love and holding that and embodying that more fully. I see this larger season as also wherever it is that you've had past experiences with someone where you didn't feel valued, you didn't really feel loved, you didn't feel like they really held your love in high esteem. All of that past disappointment, those resentments could stir for you now. And where it is that maybe before it didn't have quite the reaction. Now it really could have an unexpectedly strong reaction as well. One thing is for sure, though, with this energy, there's no getting around needing to face the truth of a given alliance. And yet, just as you know the truth, you may doubt yourself, you may question, you may feel like really you don't, or you don't know what to believe or who to believe. That might be part of this time as well. Now, I do want to say, and I'm sorry, I'm about to say something that maybe all the tattoo artists and the, people who do cosmetic treatments and hairdressers may not like, and I'm so sorry about that. But look, it is Venus retrograde that is notoriously thought to not be a good time to have any types of cosmetic procedures, especially those that have the potential to last a really long time or cut into skin in some way. You really want to be very strategic with how you're engaging this energy at this time, just because there's so much energy here that says what you think you want and then what you end up actually getting or wanting could be very different things. And I've seen it a bunch of times. Venus goes retrograde and people buy a whole new wardrobe in a completely different style and then change their mind. People get a different haircut, dramatically different, and then change their mind. Now, amplify this tendency by 50 with the squares of Uranus, the quincunxes of Neptune. You amplify this energy that much more, and you really can see here that it becomes an energy that is rebellious, but also suggests loss as well. And so I will say this just personally, I have to be very diligent. I always have to talk to myself and remind myself and leave notes to myself, because it becomes very easy to really hit up the credit card when Venus goes retrograde. It becomes very easy to do a whole lot of shopping, especially for Venusian related things. Then Venus goes direct and you change your mind. I use an example that I remember so clearly. There was a period of time when I was wearing all black, like that was sort of my look at that period of time. And then Venus went retrograde, and all of a sudden I wanted yellow. Like I loved yellow, and I bought all this yellow. I never liked yellow, and yet I was feeling so called to it. And then Venus went direct, and I never wore yellow again. So it literally was charging up my credit card for a lot of yellow clothing that I only wore for that period of time while Venus was retrograde. So that to me encapsulates what some people might experience with Venus retrograde. I know I live life fully. So yeah, sometimes I live those aspects fully as well. And I do it so you don't have to do it. I do it so that you can learn from it if you so desire. But yeah, that's the kind of thing. Tattoos can take a very long time to heal or have unexpected results when you get them during a retrograde. And cosmetic procedures as well, new hairstyles, it ends up not being what it is that that feels like it resonates with you, especially once we navigate forward. You can change your mind where it comes to, if you bought a sweater or two, not a big deal. But if it's something much more sweeping, much more consequential, if it is that you're taking out a whole lot of credit in order to get what it is that you feel you want to acquire, these become moments that ask you to instead use Venus retrograde a different way, which is in contemplation, which is in being still, asking you if there's love here. Because sometimes it is not feeling the love and the vacancy of that we look to fill in other ways. And sometimes that is related to love or money or love expressions and beauty expressions. These can be ways in which we desire to fill something within us. Very strong cultural example. Years ago, I remember Katy Perry, during a Venus retrograde, she cut off all her hair and dyed it blonde. And she is somebody who had, very distinct black hair. for a really long time. And so she does this. And I remember it so clearly because it was during a Venus retrograde. And I said, oh boy, she's going to regret that. And years later, she talked about how it was during that time when she did that, that she was feeling so awful inside. And it was one of those things she did. And it just ended up creating that much more negative momentum for her. And it symbolized something that wasn't necessarily affirming of something, deeper, more meaningful, her appreciating her own beauty as she was. That doesn't mean you shouldn't chop off your hair and dye it blonde if that's what you want to do. If you've watched me for a while, I like to say it's just hair. I like to have fun with it. But if you're doing it during a Venus retrograde, going through these dramatic changes, which becomes very possible with this energy, it just may not be for the reason you think. And then once you stop and allow yourself to really be with it, you may realize that there was something else going on in your heart that you maybe were not ready to fully be with and sit with, and it came out in that way. It's hard to be still in those moments, but it can be now that ultimately by being willing to have some sense of being willing to be still, being willing to step back just a little bit, that you might just find a deeper type of beauty within you. But doing that, taking that step is going to take a whole lot of intention. It's not necessarily going to be easy, I have to say, from my own experience. And yet the outcome is going to be the same. Being able to see yourself with eyes of love, to appreciate yourself with greater love, is ultimately a practice in wisdom as well. This is happening in the sign of Leo. And so we want people who genuinely appreciate us, but also we want a love that we can be loyal to, that we can truly connect with, that feels like we can give ourselves to completely. And we may tell ourselves it's there, and then in an instant realize it isn't. Tell ourselves it's there, and then be disappointment. Think that it was always there, and then have doubt. Think that we have it, but then it transforms and we're not sure what we feel about it. And so pace yourself. Breakups that happen with this kind of Venus retrograde might not stay broken up, and yet there could be something honest that comes forward, and what you want to do with it will reveal itself very, very quickly. It is going to be, once we get to the 7th of October, very quickly afterwards, that Venus will change signs and stand across the sky from Saturn. And I think this is going to be that moment of truth, a moment of honest evaluation. So if we went crazy with the credit cards, this is where the bill comes due. If it is that we went all out with a whole new wardrobe, this is where we realize that, okay, this really isn't my style. And so you do whatever you do with clothes you no longer want. If it is that we went all out in a relationship, established or new, this is where we're able to see things from a more measured perspective, to figure out what it is that we really want to do and how we're going to implement it, how we're going to navigate forward from there. What I love about this year for us, there's so much here. It is a valuable and meaningful astrological moment. Wow. Is it a powerful celestial time? I will say 2023, so much is going to change for so many of us. And yet it is just a taste. Remember, the world that we had as we began this decade will be a very different world that we will end the decade with. 2023 is pivotal in showing us what that new world just might be, and how it is that we want to engage it will come to the surface now. As much as we have this strong Aquarian energy with a Pluto and Aquarius, energy of the collective, we've also got that extended Venus retrograde season in Leo, opposite the sign of Aquarius. That contrast is going to be so fascinating because it is Venus in Leo that's going to invite us to look at who we are, what we want in our hearts, what loyalty looks like for us, what depth of meaning looks like for us, but also the truth of where we are in love is going to be quite undeniable. But the thing is that sometimes we need an honest evaluation to figure out where it is that we truly want to go. That's true collectively. The honesty of Pluto is quite unforgiving. It insists that we turn it over, and we are going to be looking at how it is that we operate together as a collective, what we owe each other, what we don't, and how it is that we now understand our deep interrelationships with others. But at the same time, we're led back to self. We get into those summer months and into the fall where we are being asked to look that much more deeply at our own state of heart, our own state of self-worth, self-embodiment, and acknowledging our specialness. Being willing to do that from a place of humility just might be the work of true healing that invites us to not only find a level of self-acceptance within, but love and acceptance for each other as well. Well, thank you so much for watching. What are you excited about this year of 2023? Thank you for watching this far. Well, look, let me know in the comments below what you're looking forward to this year. I love reading you guys. And of course, if you want expanded exclusive video scopes, including the year ahead video scopes, they are up now in the Superstar space at NadiyaShahSuperstars.com and available for download at NadiyaShah.com as well. Some of the videos go up to 30 minutes. I think all videos are at least 20 minutes. I can say for sure they're at least 15 minutes. It really depended on what it was that I was talking about, given the given signs and what was taking place. But I can say that these big energies I've spoken about, that's what I talk about in those special horoscopes looking at the year ahead. So I hope that you absolutely love them and enjoy them, whether you're accessing them in the Superstar space or, again, download. Coming up right now is Preview Horoscopes, where you get some insights into what it is that is coming up ahead for you based on your sign right now. Thank you. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for being here, walking another year with me. I am truly so grateful for it. It'll be a great year. Enjoy. Hello, fabulous superstar Aries. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2022. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. I know if you thought last year, and especially the middle of the last year, brought with it fresh energy and new beginnings, thanks to Jupiter just dipping into your sign, well, this year you will be fully immersed in that transit. And yet, that's not just what's happening. As big as that is, it is going to be this year in July that the North Node will enter your sign, marking the beginning of a very powerful window, a year and a half when the universe will work overtime to align you with a higher, more loving vision for your life. And you'll get a taste of that even before we get there. In April, we are going to have a solar eclipse in your sign at the end of your sign. And this just might mark one of the most important moments of 2023 for you. This solar return holds within it brand new pathways and brand new beginnings, really new definitions of self, a new identity for you. And yet there's something about it that also represents a culmination and a conclusion of sorts. You are, in many ways this year, beginning again. As part of bringing in fresh energy, starting fresh new cycles, and truly aligning yourself and becoming something more than you knew you could be before. So let's take each of these moments one at a time, because we've got a lot to talk about here. Now, where it comes to Jupiter, of course, there is a Jupiter special horoscope for your sign. So I'm not going to repeat myself too much, but I do want to say for this year ahead, you do want to be mindful, because the big things happening with Jupiter right until the middle of May. Hello, Hello, fabulous superstar Taurus. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And it is going to be this year that we have a remarkable and important transit taking place for you. On the 16th of May, Jupiter will enter your sign, marking a brand new cycle of fresh and optimistic energy. This is an energy of vitality, and chances are you'll be feeling more buoyant in all kinds of ways, emotionally, spiritually, and physically as well. What tends to happen with this is that people start telling you that you look better because also you're feeling quite better as well. You see the possibilities coming up ahead, and you can feel yourself on a brand new trajectory. This energy is going to take you right into next year as well. And so you'll be able to tap into this energy in all kinds of ways once we get past the middle of May and move forward from there. But on the way there, we've got lots taking place as well, and big, important celestial events, the kinds that really are once in a lifetime, and how they will speak to you specifically becomes that much more personal as well. Pluto in a brand new sign is going to square that Jupiter just as it enters your sign as well. Perhaps the most important moment of the year will transpire at that time. So let's take it one at a time. Let's start with the beginning of the year. And as we enter a new year, we've got a couple of interesting celestial phenomenon. On the one hand, we are going to have Mars still retrograde and going direct on the 12th of the month. And so January 12th, Mars goes direct, and this happens in a financial part of your sky. And it is as if finally you understand. Hello, fabulous superstar Gemini. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now, and it is truly a special time for you. The year begins with a sense of power and a reminder of purpose, thanks to Mars standing still and officially going direct mid-month. This rare Mars retrograde season in your sign, it is meant to awaken some truth about who you are. Now, you add to this really big moves in fellow air signs. On the one hand, we've got Pluto going into Aquarius. This is going to open up the world for you and shift your worldview, religious views, philosophical views in dramatic ways. And then we've also got an eclipse happening in fellow air sign Libra that awakens your heart and opens your heart up creatively and romantically in October. So you can see here there's a lot to talk about and a lot of very important and big celestial events taking place, the kinds that truly are once in a lifetime, and you are right in the thick of it, right out of the gate, thanks to that Mars retrograde season. And that's how we start the year. It's interesting because whenever we start a new year, it is this sense of fresh energy and a brand new beginning. And for you, this beginning truly is a seed. It is the spark. It is the very beginning taking place now, thanks to Mars stationary right out of the gate. On the 12th, when Mars does go direct, well, this is the official start of your new year. There is an awakening set to take place for you in January that reminds you of your truth, your power, and the limit. Hello, fabulous superstar Cancer. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. You know, we talk a lot about what it means to be authentically you and being your most authentic self. And sometimes it can sound a bit like a buzzword, if you will. But it's another thing to actually live it. There's a very famous quote by Rumi that says, "Your job is not to seek love, but instead to look at the barriers within you that keep you from it." That is a paraphrase. Well, this year marks the beginning of a larger journey where that's exactly what you're going to be doing. What it is that you understand as what it is to be truly you, well, chances are that's going to change, in some cases dramatically so. And where it is that there are some difficult truths about that, well, they will come to the surface now. At the same time, some of these truths may involve the people in your life, your group alliances, your friendships as well. They may be part of showing you your understanding of what it is to be really honest with yourself and how that can be a force of transformation. But at the same time, understanding power differently is going to come right to the surface. And as part of that, power struggles and power games could be a part of the taste that you get this year. And yet, it is up to you to decide what games you no longer are going to play. And a part of this year is defining power differently so that it comes to involve you defining yourself on your own terms and knowing that power ultimately comes from being at peace with yourself, at peace with your choices, even if it's hard and even if other people tell you that that shouldn't be the case. And so we've got a lot to talk about here. I am going to say, of course, there are going to be special horoscopes, right? So be on the lookout for that. And some are already up in the superstar space. Hello, fabulous superstar Leo. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And this is a very special year, especially for you. There is so much that is so big that is taking place, and a lot of it really comes down to partnerships, alliances, and love as well. Now, that can be love in a sweeping sense, in a universal sense, but I think that it is going to be romantic partnerships in particular that are going to get a lot of attention for Leos out there. Not only is Pluto moving into your opposite sign, but we are also going to have a Venus retrograde season play out in your sign as well. And so you can see here, even those Leos out there who love their space and love being single may end up surprising themselves by their desire to connect with another. And for those Leos who love being in their one on one alliance, well, that alliance must evolve in some way if it is going to keep up with the changes that you're going through and life is taking you through as well. There is going to be evolution in love and partnerships in one way or another, and approaching these energies consciously ensures that love and wisdom is very much at the forefront. But this is also a year of career success. It's a year of you understanding what success is going to mean to you differently, who's on your side and who isn't, and a newfound determination to align with what it is that you consider a higher, more loving vision for your life. So there's a lot to talk about here. And so I'm going to go through some highlights. Hello, fabulous superstar Virgo. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And one of the more important moves that is set to take place is Saturn moving into your opposite sign. Whatever it is that you think you know about love and commitment and partnership and understanding another person and being understood, well, all of that is about to be part of some of the most important lessons you're going to learn starting now and for the better part of the next 3 years. And what you come to learn about love will stay with you well after this period of time is over. We've also got Pluto on the move, moving into a part of the sky for you that your sign has a natural affinity with. It has to do with honoring your daily life and understanding the power of the small moments as you move through your life, whether it is your work and your relationship with the people there, or whether it is how well you take care of you, a big transformation is coming. There's so much to talk about with a year like this, and I am going to take it one at a time because we do have some very big celestial events taking place. Of course, there is a Jupiter special horoscope. There's Saturn special horoscope for Saturn and Aquarius. There's going to be another one. And we've got a Venus retrograde this year as well. There'll be special for that and so much more. The decade ahead horoscope. And so all of that you can navigate to here in the superstar space. But I do want to encapsulate some big themes that are playing out for you this year that I think are going to be incredibly important. And as we begin the year, of course, we have Mars retrograde. And Mars continues to be retrograde at the top of your sky, having to do with career and life purpose. And what usually happens with a retrograde like this is that you're very focused on some deadline or some goal that has to be met. Hello, fabulous superstar Libra. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And this is a year that a lot of astrologers, myself included, have been looking forward to for a while, when so much changes now. And that includes for you as well. Of course, the very big move is the fact that Pluto is moving into fellow air sign Aquarius. Now, this is just a little bit of a taste. From the 23rd of March right to the 10th of June. That's it. We get this little bit of a taste for this year, and then we get Pluto retrograding out and returning again next year. And so this is about you and your heart and the desires of your heart feeling imperative, feeling as if they take on greater importance in your life. There can be somewhat of an obsessive quality where it comes to Pluto. And so, whether it is that you start to feel that much more determined to take a passion and turn it into an entrepreneurial endeavor, or to use your creativity in some way to lend itself to large gains in your life. But of course, for many Libras, this is going to play out in the context of love and romantic love and the desire to get your flirt on and connect with others. Well, this and so much more becomes that much more possible for you now. I do want to say, though, where it comes to other areas of life, we are well lit up as well. You are going to have Jupiter in your opposite sign of partnership as we start the year, and then moving into a part of the sky that has to do with wealth, and it has to do with healing and truth and authenticity in a way that I think you would. Hello, fabulous superstar Scorpio. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And this is a year of very big moves. Now, for you, there are a couple of things that I do want to mention. Of course, your modern ruling planet, Pluto, changing signs. This is a rare move of this very slow moving planet, which does suggest the very beginning of a 20-year journey of understanding what's really going on within you and with your past and finding home in new ways. But at the same time, what we have this year is Jupiter moving into your opposite sign. The ancients believed this was one of the best cycles where it came to love and advancing love as well. But what I find especially intriguing is that we are going to have an eclipse in your sign. And this will be the last eclipse in your sign until we are into the next decade. That's how far ahead we're looking here. And eclipses are always the universe shaking things up for you and bringing you back into alignment with a higher, more loving vision for your life. The more out of alignment you have become, the more dramatic these experiences can be. And for you, it really is this factor of out of nowhere come developments that help you to know yourself differently and that shift your identity even in ways that may take you aback and by surprise, but ultimately you'll be really grateful for. So there's so much to talk about here. Let's take it one at a time. I'm going to start with right out of the gate as we begin the year. We do so with your ancient ruling planet Mars retrograde. And with Mars retrograde in... Hello, fabulous superstar Sagittarius. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And this is a really special time. I mean, this is a big year, a year that a lot of astrologers, including myself, have been looking forward to, including myself, and I've been talking about for a really long time. Now, for you, we've got Pluto, of course, changing signs, leaving a financial part of your sky. You'll get a little taste of what that's like. I think that you are going to be very grateful for that. Chances are, moving forward from here, you'll start to understand what it is to move towards financial stability. And then we have Saturn changing signs as well, moving into the foundation of your chart, helping you to create greater stability at home and with your past as well. In the midst of all this, we have Venus going retro. That is huge. And that is going to define much of the summer and into the autumn season as well, along with eclipses. Well, look, there's so much to talk about here. So let's take it one at a time. Of course, as we begin the year, Mars is slowing down to a standstill in your opposite sign. And it is here that Mars will go direct on the 12th of January. And so I do feel, at least right out of the gate, as we're starting the year, chances are you're focusing in on another person. Some one-on-one alliance has your attention now. It could be a business alliance, but I will say this most likely has to do with love, though I'll talk about love specifically once we navigate a little further into this video. Regardless. Hello, fabulous superstar Capricorn. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. And really, this year is when you will start to truly understand what it is to feel a massive shift of energy in a way that perhaps you can't even begin to fathom. That is the very nature of Pluto itself. March is the magic month. Not only is your ruling planet, Saturn, changing signs, but we also have Pluto stepping out of your sign, however briefly, from March 23rd to June 10th, at which time Pluto will retrograde back in. And you will have a little bit of this back and forth happening this year, next year as well, before Pluto comfortably leaves your sign, not to return for your lifetime. With Pluto having been in your sign since 2008, well, this can be an energy of obsession. Another way to understand it, though, is focus and determination. Understanding what really matters, what's worth your attention, and maybe what truly isn't. Regardless of what direction you were focusing this very powerful energy, it allowed you to facilitate massive transitions in your life. And chances are, I will say, just about every Capricorn I know, in one way or another, has become a power player in their own right and in their own realm. Well, now you get to take all of that energy and apply it to a deeper understanding of self-love and self-esteem. But also, you get to take that understanding and apply it to your understanding of how you earn money and how you spend money as well. As Pluto begins the slow journey. Hello, fabulous superstar Aquarius. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What a remarkable year it is, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. It is a remarkable astrological time, especially for you. The very big celestial events are taking place in March, of course, and this is something that myself and many astrologers have been talking about for years. Myself, for years. And that is because it is going to be in the month of March that, on the one hand, you have Saturn leaving your sign on the 7th of March. And this is going to help you to feel like this very consequential and serious energy calms right down. However, it's where Saturn will move to that ends up being significant for you. You have spent the better part of the last 3 years earning a sense of self respect. Now you get to implement that where it comes to self love, self esteem, and your finances as well. But just as Saturn leaves 2 weeks later, what happens? It is going to be Pluto that enters on the 23rd of March. You're going to get a little bit of a taste of this very big energy, and it is energy of power and transformation. Your identity is on the precipice of going through a huge change. The superficial and the superfluous just isn't going to work for you anymore. As you find yourself getting in touch with some essential truths about who you are, you get determined to live them that much more. Pluto in your sign until June 10th at first. Next year, you're going to have a little back and forth as well. But really, this is a transit you're going to feel for the next 20 years. And over the course of this time, you are Hello, fabulous superstar Pisces. Welcome to your horoscope for the year of 2023. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. It is a remarkable astrological year, without a doubt. Big moves happening in the sky now. It is going to be this particular year that we've got some truly phenomenal energy, big energies playing out. Saturn entering your sign really does take the cake for you. This is the beginning of a cycle that is about earning a sense of grounded self-respect. It's about showing yourself something that you have followed through, that you understand the larger implications, and you understand how to behave in a way that is going to help you to align with the success of your choosing. Saturn always asks us to take responsibility for our happiness. When it is Saturn in your sign, that very journey becomes that much more important and that much more near and dear to your heart. It's about accepting the truth and reality of your life and of a specific situation and understanding what meaningful and practical change look like for you. That is the very big news that's going to play out for you. But we've got a year of a lot of important energies. And so I want to take it in somewhat of a chronological order, even though, yes, Saturn in your sign takes the cake as you begin a brand new 28.5-year cycle of understanding some truths, some strength, and some self-respect about yourself and within yourself that truly can put your life on a whole new trajectory going forward from here. Welcome to the exciting rebirth of Superstar, featuring choose your membership rate as low as just $3 a month. At Superstar, you get expanded, exclusive video scopes each and every week, unlimited access to special horoscopes, class passes for Synchronicity University, consultations with me, and so much more. All of this in the Superstar space. I look forward to meeting you there.